Today we are looking at a case from the first part of the 20th century, so sit back as we go to Portugal. Maria Alves was born in 1897 in Campania, a neighbourhood within the historic city of Porto, one of Portugal's major cultural hubs, renowned for its rich heritage and vibrant art scene. Although she attended the local school, education for girls in Portugal at the time was quite limited and focused on preparing them for traditional domestic roles. Most girls received only basic primary schooling, learning to read, write and do simple arithmetic, alongside lessons in religion and household skills like sewing and cooking. Religion played a central role in education and daily life, reinforcing traditional expectations and emphasizing virtues like obedience and modesty, which further limited opportunities beyond domestic responsibilities. Opportunities for secondary education were rare and usually reserved for girls from wealthier families. Broader societal views considered women's roles more as wives and mothers, so many families did not prioritize extended schooling for their daughters. It wasn't until the establishment of the Portuguese Republic in 1910 that educational reforms began slowly expanding access for girls, but significant barriers remained during Maria's youth. At the age of 19, when most of her friends were focusing on home life, Maria was determined to enter the theatre, something that she had dreamt about for as long as she could remember. She had already made an appearance at the Carlos Alberto Theatre, but now seeking broader opportunities, she moved to Lisbon. It was now 1916, and as World War I raged across Europe, life in Portugal was marked by political instability, economic hardship, and growing social unrest. Though the country had only recently entered the war on the side of the Allies, its effects were already being felt, with food shortages, rising prices, and widespread uncertainty shaping daily life. But despite the tense atmosphere, Maria secured roles at other notable venues, such as the Eden and Apollo theatres. Her talent did not go unnoticed, and she was soon hired by Augusto Gomes, a prominent theatre businessman, for his national-renowned company named Portugalia. When the war ended, Maria travelled with the troupe, performing in several countries, including Spain, France, Morocco and Brazil, where she gained valuable experience and exposure. Upon returning to Lisbon, she built on this success by taking leading roles in a variety of shows at Parque Maia, the city's entertainment district, known for its vibrant theatres and lively performances, further establishing herself as a prominent figure in Portuguese theatre. At the end of 1925, Maria accepted an invitation to spend the winter season in Porto, her home city. This opportunity was significant, both professionally and financially, at a time when steady work was often uncertain for actresses, many of whom struggled to secure consistent roles in a competitive and unpredictable industry. After completing her engagements, she returned to Lisbon towards the end of March 1926, but her relief at finishing the theatre commitments was short-lived, as she was growing increasingly anxious, as the man who owned the theatre production company that had put on the show in Porto, named Oscar Ribeiro, had not paid her final payments. This was worrying for Maria, both financially and emotionally, as she was the mother of two children, a girl who was staying with Maria's parents in Porto, and a boy who was studying at boarding school. Maria wanted to bring her daughter to live with her in Lisbon, and the uncertainty of not being paid on time only added to the pressure she faced in balancing her career and family responsibilities during this uncertain period. In the quiet hours before dawn, on the 31st of March 1926, a woman's body was discovered at the corner of a narrow back street, running parallel to Lisbon's Avenida Almirante Case. It was a dim stretch of the city, where little stirred after midnight, and the streets were mostly empty. A man noticed the figure lying on the pavement and called for help. When the authorities arrived, they found a young woman, motionless, bruised, and dressed in torn clothing. Her coat, handbag and jewellery were missing, and although her face looked familiar, no one knew who she was. The woman's body was then transferred to the mortuary. Later that morning, a woman named Emilia de Castro Neves grew concerned when she found out that a neighbour had not returned home, and when she heard that a young woman had been found murdered nearby, she began to suspect it might be Maria. Acting on her fears, Emilia went to the police, who accompanied her to the mortuary. There she faced the lifeless body and was overcome with sorrow as she recognized her beautiful 29-year-old neighbor, Maria Alves, a well-known actress in Lisbon's popular theatre scene. Her identification drew widespread attention and turned the case into a subject of intense public interest. When the body was examined, it was clear that Maria had suffered multiple injuries, including numerous bruises and abrasions. Most notably, there were 3 severe bruises, 1 on her chest and 2 on her abdomen, along with small marks on her legs. Her dress was torn at both the neckline and hem, leaving no doubt that she had met a violent end. Police officers took note of the missing items and, faced with what looked like a street attack, concluded that she had been the victim of a robbery that had turned violent. It was a plausible explanation. The area was not far from the city's central boulevards, well known for being poorly lit at night, and petty crime was not uncommon. With no witnesses and few immediate clues, the authorities leaned towards the simplest theory, a tragic but random act of violence. However, not everyone was convinced with their explanation. Among the first to question it was a journalist named Reinaldo Ferreira, better known to the public as Reporter X, a celebrated crime writer and one of the most widely read voices of the time. He had built his reputation by investigating some of the most sensational crimes of the early 20th century, often combining fact with imaginative detail. He was not only a journalist, but also a playwright and a novelist, and his columns carried a distinctive character, bold, suggestive, and unafraid to challenge official conclusions. He had known Maria Alves personally. They had moved in similar social and artistic circles, and he had followed her career closely. Her sudden and violent death worried him, and he thought that the official story the police were giving, that she was the victim of a robbery gone wrong, was not right. To him it seemed all too inconsistent and far too convenient. Maria had just returned to Lisbon from a professional engagement. She would not have been wandering the streets at night, and Reinaldo did not believe that she would have fallen victim to an opportunistic mugging. In his column, he wrote about the attack and the investigation, but he chose not to challenge the police outright. Instead, with his usual literary subtlety, he suggested that there was a darker, more personal motive behind the murder. He based his article on the Spanish detective novel El Misterio del Cursal by José Frances, a well-known writer, often described as a Spanish Conan Doyle. In that story, a celebrated actress was killed, not by a stranger, but by her lover, driven by jealousy and wounded pride. By invoking this fictional parallel, he avoided making a direct accusation, but the comparison was unmistakable to readers familiar with Maria's life. It was a clever approach, using fiction to illuminate fact. Reinaldo understood both his audience and the delicate politics of crime reporting. He painted a picture that cast doubt over the robbery theory without needing to produce immediate evidence. Many understood what he was trying to portray, that someone close to her may have had a motive to see her silenced. His words reverberated throughout Lisbon's public and the press. If a man like Reporter X, experienced, insightful, and closely connected to the theatre world, believed there was more to the story, then perhaps the case deserved a second look. The murder, already shocking in its brutality, now carried an air of scandal, betrayal, and cover-up. It was no longer just a tragedy, it was a mystery. The funeral of Maria Alves was held at the Prazeres Cemetery in Lisbon and drew a large and emotional crowd. So many people came to say goodbye that the procession was delayed for more than 2 hours. It was a clear sign of how deeply her life, and now her death, had affected the public. She was remembered not just for her performances, but for the grace and independence she had come to represent. While the city mourned, another reporter was quietly conducting his own investigation. Antonio Ferro, a journalist at the newspaper Diario de Noticias, began to examine the case more closely. He noted that none of the residents near the spot where Maria's body was found had told the police that they had heard any noise on the night of her death. No shouts, no cries, no signs of a struggle. The detail raised doubts about the theory that she had been attacked there. Surely someone would have heard her screams. He believed that Maria had likely been murdered elsewhere and her body dumped at a corner, parallel to Avenida Almirante case. As he looked more closely at Maria's life, His suspicion turned to Augusto Gomez, who was Maria's manager and a man with whom she had been romantically involved. When he spoke to Augusto Gomez, he told the journalist that he had been at the theatre that evening and after the performance ended, had walked part of the way with Maria. He said that during their walk, she again brought up the outstanding money she was owed, and according to Augusto, he paid her the full amount there and then, and told her that he would recover it directly from Oscar Ribeiro. But strangely, Augusto Gomez emphasized that the exchange had not been done discreetly. Instead, he said that this was carried out openly, in full view of a number of bystanders. After that, he claimed, they went their separate ways, each boarding a different tram. Antonio Ferro also spoke with Maria's mother, who confirmed that her daughter had been in a relationship with Augusto Gomez. However, she voiced serious concerns, describing him as a possessive man with a volatile temper. She said that the relationship was fraught with frequent arguments, and that Augusto would become openly jealous whenever someone else showed interest in her daughter. Her statement painted a portrait of a man consumed by jealousy and a need for control. Friends of Maria echoed these concerns, recounting episodes of Augusto's violent temper and revealing that he had physically assaulted her on more than one occasion. As the details of this troubled relationship came to light through Antonio's reporting, public doubt grew over the official police conclusion. Many began to question whether Maria's death was truly the result of random street violence, or a calculated and personal act. The newspaper's publication of these allegations had caused quite a sensation in Portugal, and it wasn't long before a crucial witness came forward, a man named João Monteiro, a navy captain and a neighbour of Augusto Gomez. He revealed that in the early hours following the murder, he had seen a taxi driving through the city with Augusto Gomez and an unconscious woman inside. This revelation was reported in the Diario de Noticias, and the investigation was now pushed into a new and urgent direction when the police arrested Augusto Gomez. The taxi involved was a Citroën, a relatively uncommon make in Lisbon during that period, which made tracking down the driver much easier for the investigators. Behind the wheel was João Fernandes, who operated the taxi bearing the number 9237. The distinctive nature of this particular car quickly caught the public's imagination, and the details surrounding it became the focal point of the media coverage. As a result, it became known as the case of Taxi 9237, a name that stuck and came to symbolize the drama and mystery surrounding the tragic death of Maria Alves. When João Fernandes was interviewed by police officers, he gave a detailed account of the night in question. He said that the day before the body was found, Augusto Gomez had asked him to wait at a discreet location opposite the Maria Vittoria Theatre at precisely midnight, and to make sure that the taxi curtains were drawn. He added that he assumed that this was just another one of his clandestine romantic meetings, which he often conducted, so he agreed. João said that he had no suspicion that his intentions were anything other than meeting a woman. He went on to say that just past 12 a.m, on the 31st of March, he approached the arranged spot with his taxi-free light on, and Augusto Gomez signalled him to stop. He said he did this, and Augusto and a woman got into the back of the car. He did not see anything as the curtains were drawn, but he heard laughter and movement, so presumed that the couple were simply enjoying some private moments on the back seats. João Fernandes then paused, before saying that suddenly Augusto banged on the window and shouted that he must stop the car. He said he did as he was told, and Augusto then climbed into the front seat beside him, looking pale and frightened, and then said that he had just killed the other passenger, the actress Maria Alves. Now speaking in a shaky voice, he explained that after the murder, Augusto Gomez regained his composure and quickly devised a plan to cover his tracks. He said that he deliberately tore Maria's dress and removed her jewellery to stage the scene of a robbery. The last thing he told officers was that he was then instructed to drive to a quiet location near Maria's home and leave the body there, as Augusto had said that when the body was discovered, the police would think that it was a random act of street violence. Following this testimony, officers interviewed Augusto Gomez's wife, a woman named Michelina. During questioning, she admitted that her husband had come home after midnight on the 31st of March and told her that he had murdered the actress Maria Alves. She said that not only did he tell her, he also pleaded with her to conceal Maria's coat and jewellery. When asked why she hadn't come forward earlier, Michelina simply replied, "He is the father of my children." Augusto Gomez was already at the police station and was then questioned by officers. Initially, he denied any involvement in the crime, but when he was confronted with the taxi driver's testimony and the statement from his wife, he finally admitted his guilt. He justified his actions by claiming that Maria had told him about an affair with a businessman while she was working at the theatre in Porto. This revelation, he said, wounded his pride and inflamed his jealousy. In his words, it compelled him to act as any man of honour would. The evidence already gathered supported the violent struggle that he described. Cuts and bruises on Maria's body indicated resistance, but she was ultimately overpowered by a stronger assailant. He was put on trial, but the outcome was hardly surprising. It was obvious from the start, and Augusto Gomez was found guilty of premeditated murder. The death penalty for all civilian crimes, including murder, had been abolished in Portugal in 1911, so the court sentenced him to 8 years in prison, followed by an additional 12 years of exile. Meanwhile, João Fernandes, the taxi driver whose involvement had become central to the case, was also held accountable. He received a sentence of 6 years in prison, though 2 of these were suspended, recognising his role as an accomplice rather than a principal offender. The outcomes outlined the court's effort to deliver justice, though the case continued to resonate in public memory for years to come. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next Brief Case.